I manage operations for a restaurant group that seats over 3,000 people a week across 4 locations. I know how a check moves from kitchen to table the way most people know how to breathe. So when my parents called after 3 years of complete silence and invited me to dinner to make amends, I should have asked one question before I said yes. Who's actually at that table? I didn't ask. I drove 40 minutes to the Hargrove, walked through the front doors, and found 16 members of my family already seated around a long table buried under lobster tails, Wagyu, and a $400 bottle of Bordeaux they'd started pouring before I pulled into the parking lot. My father looked up from the head of the table, smiled, and said what he thought would corner me. "You're paying, right? You owe us that much." He thought he'd won. He hadn't counted on the 2 sentences I was about to whisper to our server, or on what his own credit card was about to tell the entire family 15 minutes later. But let me back up. I built my career from the floor up, bussing tables at 17, still smelling like fryer oil on the school bus the next morning. Hostess at 19, server at 21, floor manager by 24, regional operations director by 30. I'm not wealthy. I have a paid-off condo, a retirement account I don't touch, and exactly 1 indulgence sparkling water. That's what I order every time I eat out. My staff thinks it's a quirk. It's not. When you spend years paying for everyone else's dinner, you learn to keep your own tab small enough to walk away from. The morning the invitation arrived, I was in my office reviewing a vendor contract. The kind of Tuesday that makes you forget not everyone's life runs on spreadsheets. My phone buzzed. I looked down and felt something cold settle behind my ribs. The family group chat, the one I'd been removed from 3 years ago the day I became the family villain. They'd added me back. My mother's message was warm, careful, almost rehearsed. She and Dad had been doing a lot of reflecting. They wanted to invite me to dinner at the Hargrove to start healing. Just the 4 of us, she wrote. Her, Dad, me, and my sister Brooke. A small dinner, a fresh start. Then a second message 30 seconds later. Family takes care of family, sweetheart. It's time we remembered that. Family takes care of family. She used to say that when I was 19, and she needed my server tips to cover the electric bill. She said it when I was 23, and Dad needed a cosigner on his truck. She said it when Brooke's first apartment fell through, and I quietly paid the deposit. In my house, that phrase had always meant one thing: Diana takes care of family. I noticed she hadn't said sorry. Hadn't said we were wrong. She said it was time to heal. Passive voice, no subject. No one responsible. I typed back, "I'll be there." Then I set my phone face down and went back to the contract, pretending my hands weren't shaking. 3 years ago, my sister Brooke decided to open a cafe. Not a business plan, not a market study. A cafe, because she'd seen one in Savannah with exposed brick and a matcha menu, and thought she could do that. She was 26, had never managed so much as a lemonade stand, and needed a $75,000 small business loan. The bank said yes, with a cosigner. That cosigner was supposed to be me. Mom called on a Sunday. Dad sat beside her, arms crossed, already angry before I'd said a word. I asked to see the business plan. Brooke didn't have one. I asked about projected margins, lease terms, supplier contracts. Brooke stared at me like I'd insulted her personally. Mom's voice went flat. "She's your sister. You don't need a spreadsheet to love your sister." I said no, not because I didn't love Brooke, I did. But I'd spent enough years in this industry, watching people pour their savings into concepts with no foundation. And I knew exactly what $75,000 of someone else's debt looks like at 3 in the morning, when the cafe is dark, and the loan is still due. Dad stood up, pointed at the door, said the thing that closed it for 3 years, "If you won't help this family, you're not part of it." I drove home. The next morning, I'd been removed from the group chat. No call, no text. For 3 years, I was the daughter who loved money more than her own sister. Here's what's hard to admit. The silence almost broke me, not because they were right, I knew they weren't, but because I missed being needed. That was the real wound. It took 2 years and a good therapist to name it properly. I had been the family fixer since I was 17. First paycheck went to groceries. Tax refund went to mom's dental work. When dad's transmission blew, I paid for the rebuild and told him it was covered under warranty, because I knew he'd never accept a handout from his 22-year-old daughter. When Brooke got married, I covered the florist, the photographer, and half the reception, and I smiled while Mom gave a toast about raising two strong girls. 2 strong girls, 1 bill. I didn't do it because I'm generous. I did it because I'd learned somewhere around age 15 that the fastest way to keep the peace was to make sure nobody had to ask twice. Ask once, Diana pays, everyone's happy, dinner is quiet. I trained them. I taught my parents that my wallet was a vending machine. Insert guilt, receive check. And when the machine finally said asterisk out of order or asterisk, they didn't troubleshoot it. They unplugged it and walked away. So when Mom's message came after 3 years, family takes care of family, sweetheart, I felt the old reflex fire in my chest like a muscle I hadn't stretched in years. Go fix it. Pay whatever it costs. Make it quiet again. But I also heard my therapist's voice, steady as a metronome. You taught them you would always pay. That was your mistake to fix, not by paying more. By stopping, my coworker told me not to go. She said it had ambush written all over it. My sous chef said the same thing, shorter, don't. But I'd already decided, not because I believed them, and not because I expected an apology. I wanted to sit across from my parents and find out whether 3 years had changed anything, or whether the silence had just been a longer version of the same conversation we'd always had. The one where I was expected to listen, agree, and pay. I also missed my mother, not the one who orchestrated. The one who taught me to make cornbread in a cast iron skillet when I was 9 and sang along with Dolly Parton while the butter melted. That mother hadn't called in 3 years either. But some nights I still heard the music, so I went. I set one rule, written on a sticky note pressed to my steering wheel, 1 dinner, then home. The drive was 40 minutes. No music. Hands at 10 and 2. Somewhere around the highway merge, my stomach tightened in a way I recognized. The same feeling I get when a walk-in cooler fails on a Friday night, and I know the next 6 hours are going to hurt. My body knew something my brain was still negotiating. I almost turned around at the exit ramp. Almost. The Hargrove sat at the end of a landscaped strip where the parking lot is prettier than most restaurants I've managed. I spotted Dad's truck in the 3rd row, Mom's sedan beside it. Fine. Then I saw my aunt's white Buick, my uncle's SUV, my sister's hatchback with the bumper sticker from the cafe that had closed 11 months after it opened. 3 more cars I recognized. 2 I didn't. 9 vehicles, just the 4 of us Mom had written. I sat in my car for 2 full minutes, engine off, hands on the wheel, reading that sticky note. Then I got out. I straightened my blouse, locked the car, and walked toward the entrance, because I was 32 years old and I'd spent 3 years learning how not to run. I was not going to start in a restaurant parking lot on a Thursday evening. Inside, the lobby smelled like rosemary, warm bread, and money. The hostess checked her screen. Mayfield, I nodded. Your party's already seated. She said it the way hostesses say things when they've been managing a large group for over an hour and are trying very hard not to look overwhelmed. I recognized the expression. I'd worn it myself 1,000 times. I heard them before I saw them. Laughter, clinking glasses, my aunt's unmistakable cackle cutting through the dining room. I turned the corner and saw the table. 16 chairs, every one filled except the seat at the far end, directly across from my father. White linen, heavy silverware, crystal candle holders. Lobster tails fanned across crushed ice. Wagyu sliders on a tiered stand. A charcuterie board the size of a coffee table. And in the center, a bottle of wine I recognized from vendor tastings, retail around $400, already half empty. They'd been here a while. They'd been ordering hard. The hostess leaned close before she stepped away and said quietly, "Your father put a card down to hold the reservation. Just so you know, we require one for parties over 12. I filed that sentence the way I file every operational detail. Silently, completely, Permanently, his card was on file. He'd secured the table, and yet somehow I already knew the bill wasn't meant to land on him. My mother saw me first, both arms open, every head turning. "Diana, oh, sweetheart. Look at you," actual applause, like I was a returning soldier and not the daughter they'd frozen out for 1,000 days. My aunt dabbed her eyes. My uncle whistled. Brooke raised her wine glass and smiled, the kind of smile that has teeth but no warmth. I sat down. What else do you do when 16 people are watching, and the chair is already pulled out, and a server is pouring water into your glass before your purse hits the floor? "We wanted it to be a surprise asterisk," Mom said, settling back into her seat. "The whole family together, just like old times." I said I thought it was just the four of us. She waved her hand. "Well, once Linda heard, and then Greg, and then your cousin Tara, you know how family is." I knew exactly how family was. Dad sat at the head of the table, carving a Wagyu slider like it was Thanksgiving. He waved the server over, a young guy, barely out of his teens. Moving fast but careful the way new servers do when a table is too big and too complicated, and one wrong plate means a manager conversation they can't afford. Dad rattled off additions without looking at the menu. Another round of lobster tails, 2 more Wagyu plates. "And bring another bottle of that Bordeaux, the good one," loud enough for 2 tables to hear. Then he pulled his credit card from his wallet and held it between 2 fingers like a magician, showing the audience a coin before the trick. "Put it all on this. We're celebrating tonight." He tucked the card back with a little pat. The way you pat something that's performed well, something was off. I'd grown up watching this man argue over the price of a muffler. I'd seen him return a shirt because the sale tag was missing. Raymond Mayfield did not order $400 bottles of wine. This was a performance, and it was aimed at me. "Look how well we're doing, Diana. Look how little we need you." Except the truck in the parking lot had a dent in the rear quarter panel he'd never fixed. And Mom's handbag, the same one she'd carried since I was in high school, had a cracked strap held together with a safety pin. They were performing. I just didn't know the price of admission yet. The small cuts started around the second bottle. My aunt leaned across and said, "Must be nice running all those fancy restaurants while the rest of us clip coupons." She laughed when she said it, the way people laugh when they want you to know they mean it. My cousin asked whether I ever felt guilty living so well while my parents were going through a rough patch. I hadn't known about a rough patch. Nobody told me. Brooke, without looking up from her phone, added, "She wouldn't know. She hasn't been around." Each comment landed with the precision of something rehearsed, not scripted exactly, but aligned. The way a choir finds the same note without a conductor. They'd been talking about me for a long time, and they'd arrived tonight with a shared story already written. Diana left. Diana has plenty. Diana owes. My aunt delivered the thesis statement. She took my hand like she was comforting me at a funeral and said, "Family doesn't keep score, dear." I almost laughed. This from a woman who once stopped speaking to her own daughter-in-law for 6 months over a Thanksgiving seating chart. I pulled my hand back gently and picked up my glass. Sparkling water. The only thing in front of me, the only thing I'd ordered. 16 people swimming in lobster and Bordeaux, and me with a glass of San Pellegrino sitting at the end of the table like a designated driver at a bachelor party. Our server, his name tag read *Noah*, passed behind me and caught my eye. "Just the water tonight. Just the water," I said. He nodded, like he understood something I hadn't said out loud. He was maybe 19 or 20, handling our 16 top almost alone, running every order, every refill, every "can we get more butter" from my aunt, who had asked 3 times in 20 minutes. He never complained. He never sighed. He refilled my glass without being asked, and when he set it back down, he caught me watching the table with an expression I probably should have hidden better. "Long night *", he murmured. I almost told him everything. Instead I said, "You're doing great." He blinked, startled, like he'd forgotten a guest could say that. Then he straightened up about 1/2 inch and moved on to the next refill. I watched him go and thought about the girl who used to carry 4 plates up her forearm and cry in the walk-in on the hard nights. Around the 3rd bottle, my father set down his fork and looked at me directly for the first time all evening. The table went quiet the way tables go quiet when someone important is about to speak. "Diana," he said my name like a verdict. "I think it's time we cleared the air." I waited. "Your mother and I have been struggling more than we've let on. And the way I see it, family shows up for family. You've done well for yourself, better than any of us expected." He paused, letting that land. "So we figured tonight you could take care of dinner." "Consider it," he smiled, * back pay. Back pay, 16 people. Lobster, Wagyu, 2 bottles of $400 wine with a 3rd on the way. I did the math in under 4 seconds. The bill was going to land somewhere between $2,200 and $2,800 before tip, and my father was sitting there calling it back pay. The table watched me. This was the moment they'd planned the whole dinner around. My discomfort, my compliance, my inability to make a scene in public. They knew me. They knew I'd been trained since childhood to keep the peace, to reach for my wallet before the silence got uncomfortable. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that I'd spent 15 years becoming the person who knows exactly what to do when a situation requires a quiet word with the right member of the staff. I smiled, set my glass down, pushed back my chair. "Excuse me for just one moment." I found Noah near the service station, his back to the dining room, checking his order tickets. I kept my voice low. "Noah," he turned. "I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it without making it a production." He straightened immediately, the instinct of someone who's been trained well. "Of course, the card my father put on file to hold the reservation," I said. "Run the tab on that card. The full tab. Don't come to the table and ask, don't announce it. Just run it and bring him the receipt." Noah looked at me for exactly 1 second. Then, "Yes, ma'am." I walked back to the table, sat down and picked up my water glass. My father was still watching me with the patient expression of a man who believed he'd already won. The rest of the table was quiet, waiting. "You know what, Dad *, I said, "you're right. Family shows up for family." I smiled. "I completely agree." He smiled back, and for approximately 12 minutes he believed he'd gotten what he came for. I know it was 12 minutes because I watched the clock above the bar. I nursed my water. I let the conversation restart around me. My aunt refilling her glass, my uncle cutting into a lobster tail, Brooke back on her phone. The performance of a normal family dinner for anyone watching from the outside. Then Noah appeared at my father's elbow. He set down a small leather folder and said professionally, * sir, whenever you're ready. My father reached for it, flipped it open. His face didn't collapse all at once. It rearranged, slowly, feature by feature, the way a building settles before it falls. He looked at the total. He looked at the card receipt, his card already processed. He looked up at Noah, who had the expression of a man who is absolutely certain he followed instructions correctly and has no further comment. Then my father looked at me. I looked back at him. Said nothing. "What is this?" he said, quiet enough to believe no one else heard. Everyone heard. "That's the bill *, I said, "on your card. The one you put down when you made the reservation. That's not." He stopped, started again. "The point was, I know what the point was." My voice stayed even, the way it stays even when I'm managing a crisis in the middle of a Friday service. "You put your card down." The server ran it. "That's how restaurants work, Dad." My aunt had gone still. My uncle set down his fork. Brooke looked up from her phone for the first time all night. My father's jaw tightened. He reached into his wallet, and I watched his hands slow down as he actually looked at what was in there, looked at his options. Then he closed the wallet. "I expected you to handle this," he said. "I know you did *, I said, and I meant it. I did know. I'd known since I counted 9 cars in the parking lot. I'd known since Mom's message about family taking care of family. I'd known since the hostess told me he'd put a card on file, but I think you've handled it just fine." Silence, not the comfortable kind. The kind that fills a room from corner to corner and doesn't leave space for anyone to pretend they didn't hear. My aunt picked up her wine glass, put it back down without drinking. My cousin Tara looked at the tablecloth. Brooke looked at me for a long moment, and I couldn't read what was behind it, and I decided that was okay. My mother's eyes were bright, not with anger. With something that looked almost like recognition, I stood up, picked up my purse, smoothed my blouse. It was good to see everyone, I said. And I meant that too. In the complicated way you mean things that are true and painful at the same time. I found Noah on my way out and handed him an envelope I'd prepared before I left my condo that evening. Cash tip, enough to make his night worth it. He looked at it, then at me. Thank you, asterisk, he said. For earlier too, what you said, you're going to be good at this, I told him, whatever you do next. I walked out through the heavy glass doors with the brass handles. The parking lot was quiet. The air was cool. My 9-year-old Honda was exactly where I'd left it, and the sticky note was still on the steering wheel. One dinner, then home. I sat for a moment before I started the engine. I'd gone looking for closure and gotten something more complicated than that. Not a reunion, not an apology, not the mother with the cast iron skillet and the Dolly Parton song. But something real, which is more than I'd walked in with. The machine had finally told them what asterisk out of order actually meant. I pulled out of the Hargrove parking lot and drove home in the dark, windows down, radio off, and for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't carrying anyone else's tab.